Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been curious to know why Greenland is part of Denmark, then keep watching this video because they are going to tell us everything we need to know about that. This video is from Captivating History. Shout out to them for this video. So without much talking, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's get into it.
Greenland is not as big as you think. The Mercator, a cylindrical map projection in common use today, inflates the size of the countries close to the poles. This is why regions like Antarctica and Alaska seem larger than they are. Greenland is still quite a large country, just not as large as the average map shows. For context, one can look at Mexico's size, 761,610 square miles, and then compare it to Greenland's 836,300 square miles. However, while Mexico has a large population of around 128 million, the 10th largest globally, Greenland has a pretty small population of about 56,000. Let's look at Greenland, the biggest island in the world that is not considered a continent. The country is physiographically located in the continent of North America because it lies on the North American tectonic plate between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, making it a point of interest for the United States. However, the American dream of owning Greenland cannot be fulfilled as long as the Danes won't let it go. Denmark, a much smaller country than Greenland in size, but a much larger country by population, has a claim on Greenland as a constituency. The Kingdom of Denmark, or the Danish realm, officially contains 3 constituent countries: Denmark, the Faroe Islands, and Greenland. But why does Greenland belong to Denmark?
So hold on, is the Kingdom of Denmark different from Denmark the country? Because I don't understand. Why is Denmark having other countries inside of it? I'm kind of confused on that, but I guess I'll understand if we keep going.
About 2,000 miles separate the two countries. Regardless, the two have been politically and culturally linked for a millennium. In fact, until 1953, Greenland was a Danish colony and was later defined as a district. The people of Greenland have political representation in the Danish parliament. 2 representatives from Greenland and 2 from the Faroe Islands sit in the Folketing, which convenes in the Christiansborg Palace in Copenhagen. To understand the cultural ties between the Norse cultures and Greenland, one has to look at the history of the 2 regions. Today, the majority of the Greenlandic population comprises Inuits, almost 88%. While some wrongly refer to the inhabitants as Aboriginals, meaning First Peoples, the association is wrong. These people arrived in waves, probably from Canada. The first wave came around 4,500 years ago in the form of the Sakak culture. About 2,500 years ago, another wave followed, bringing with it the Dorset culture. The third wave of immigration brought the Thule culture from Alaska around 1,000 years ago. Today, there are Kalalit in the west, the Tunumid in the east, and the Inuit in the north of Greenland. The island is the least densely populated region in the entire world, and for a good reason. Despite the green in the name, its icy tundra makes an immediate impression as one steps onto the island. One might assume that the terrain has remained virtually unchanged since the Norsemen made their first appearance. People have often heard of the famous voyager Leif.
So there are some people from here that even migrated all the way from Canada. That's quite new to me. This is why it's good to watch videos like this because you learn a lot.
Erikson, the first European to find his way to America. Leif's father, Eric the Red, first colonized Greenland for the Vikings. And when he killed Eyjolf the Foul in 982, the wheels of Viking justice were set in motion, leading to Eric's trial. He was found guilty of murder and outlawed from Iceland and Norway for 3 years. Eric the Red sailed west across the Atlantic during his banishment until he happened upon Greenland. He spent the rest of his banishment exploring this new territory. Eric initially found a land mostly covered with glaciers and ice fields, and considerably colder than Iceland. But when he sailed up the western coast, he reached a part of the island that was free of ice and similar to Iceland. The island may have been cold and harsh, with no great forests, but there was plenty of sea life off the coast, pastures for cattle, and adequate wildlife on the island to sustain a settlement. Off the coast of Greenland, the Vikings could hunt walruses, seals, and whales. On land, they could hunt foxes, bears, and caribou. This enabled them to make a living as traders and buy much-needed resources from Norway, such as timber for homesteads and shipbuilding. When Eric returned to Iceland, he managed to persuade some Icelandic Vikings that there was enough land to farm, there were pastures suitable for raising livestock, and the fjords were teeming with cod and other fish. In the summer of 985, Eric the Red and his followers set sail for Greenland, and this was no small undertaking. There were 25 ships, approximately 300 settlers, horses, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and various equipment. Of the 25 ships that set sail from Iceland, only 14 made it safely. The rest either turned back or were lost at sea. Eric the Red may be credited with discovering Greenland and starting the first settlement on the island, but he did not single-handedly settle Greenland. This joint effort relied on everyone pulling their weight. Eric and his peers had developed two settlements, the East Settlement and the West Settlement, near the present-day capital of Greenland, Nuuk. King Olaf would later send Leif Erikson, Eric the Red's son, to preach Christianity to Greenlanders. In the 12th century, it is believed the Scandinavian settlers came into contact with the Thule people, and some sources claim that the two sides were involved in some hostilities. Nevertheless, the Viking settlements declined in the following 2 centuries, and they abandoned Greenland. There were 2 major reasons for this decline. First was the harsh weather and the difficult voyage from Norway. The second was the spoils of Europe. The Norse people had
So there was a time where the Vikings were in Greenland. Okay.
preferred Europe, even at the peak of the Greenland settlements. The 16th century saw new developments as the Spanish and Portuguese colonialist ambitions took them to far-off corners of the world. King Manuel of Portugal wanted to discover a northwest passage to the Pacific Ocean. According to the Treaty of Tordesillas, signed just a few years prior, Portugal and Spain were to divide the freshly discovered lands among themselves. Greenland fell to the Portuguese Empire. But the harsh climate and the race for economic and political gains meant that Greenland lost its importance to the colonialists. In the 17th century, the island was once again ripe for the picking. So Christian IV of Denmark, the longest reigning Scandinavian monarch in history, approved plans to send expeditions to Greenland. He hoped to locate the Norse settlements, now lost, and assert Scandinavian supremacy over the island. But this was not possible as most of the expeditions were unsuccessful. On the other hand, the Inuit people were used to the region's climate and had survived for centuries. At the dawn of the 18th century, a Denmark-Norway expedition led by Hans Egede was successful and helped open Greenland up for Danish merchants. By the late 18th century, the Danes had closed Greenland off for trade with other nations. By monopolizing the trade, they tried to acclimate the local Greenlanders to the outside world at a slow pace. In the 18th century, Greenland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands had become a formal part of the Kingdom of Norway. But the next century brought more complications. With the arrival of Napoleon, things in Europe were starting to shake up. Initially, Norway wanted to remain neutral, but was forced into joining sides. Assuming that the Norwegians would side with Napoleon, the Brits shelled Copenhagen in an unprovoked attack. By doing so, the British had the exact effect on Norway that they had dreaded. The Norwegians sided with Napoleon. In 1814, a treaty known as the Treaty of Kiel.
Okay, so when the Norwegians had to pick sides, they actually chose the Napoleons. There's so many things I'm learning from this video, and I hope you are too.
Was finalized between various parties that ended Danish hostilities with the anti-French camp. Britain, Ireland, and Sweden were on one side, and the Danish-Norwegian kingdom on the other. Frederick VI of Denmark ended up giving up the Kingdom of Norway to the Swedes. However, the treaty allowed Denmark to retain control of Greenland, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands. The Swedes claimed that these territories historically belonged to the Kingdom of Norway. Norway continued to exert its claim and would declare the eastern part of Greenland as Eric the Red's land in 1931. In 1867, the U.S. became interested in Greenland and Iceland, offering vast amounts of cash to Denmark for both countries, and the answer was a resounding no. In the same year, the U.S. had bought Alaska from the Russians, so there was no doubt.
So even the US had interest in Greenland and they turned them down. Oh.
That they were serious about the purchase. At the beginning of the 20th century, Norway gained independence and disputed Denmark's claims of the ownership of Greenland. When the matter went to the Permanent Court of International Justice in 1933, the decision favored Denmark. Talking about the 20th century, How can one skip over the two great wars? The First World War was not an issue for Greenland, as Denmark maintained its neutrality throughout the war and traded with both sides. This, however, was not the case the second time. Even though Denmark tried to remain neutral at the beginning of the war, it could not manage to uphold that decision. Just as the British had attacked Copenhagen as a preventative measure during the Napoleonic Wars, the Germans invaded Denmark and Norway to prevent their occupation by the French and the British. The Germans took over Denmark, and since Denmark had not declared war against the Germans, the German military was ordered to stand down. The Danish political and social institutions continued to work rather routinely until the end of the war. Just as the Germans had entered Denmark and Norway to dissuade the Allies, the British occupied the Faroe Islands to avoid a German takeover of the area. The British had also occupied Iceland, but turned it over to the then neutral Americans. Iceland became an independent republic in 1944. As far as Greenland was concerned, the Danish asked the neutral US to defend the territory in 1941. Greenland achieved a greater sense of self-reliance during wartime, which was not allowed during the...
Isn't it crazy how a country can just come and buy another country? It's so weird, like US and trying to buy so many countries. So they bought Alaska from Russia. Crazy.
Previous Danish rule. When the war concluded in 1945, Greenland was returned to Denmark. By this time, the Greenlanders had gained some exposure and complained to the Danish authorities about their trade monopoly. Sitting on the sidelines, the US was watching this situation very closely. So, in 1946, they offered to buy Greenland from the Danes. Once again, Denmark refused the offer. In 1953, Greenland became an equal part of the Danish kingdom as the Danish constitution ended the island's colonial status. The island was termed an amt, or administrative division. The island was granted home rule as a part of a Self-Governance Act in 1979. Now, Greenland has assumed primary political and social responsibilities. However, foreign, defense, and security policies remain under the purview of the Danish government. Today, Greenland relies on Denmark for financial support, even though they handle their domestic matters internally. Some experts think that Greenland is not yet capable of ruling itself effectively without a helping hand from the Danes. America has maintained its presence in Greenland in the form of military air bases, and U.S. interest in the island has persisted. The United States has remained interested in buying Greenland. The latest offer came in 2019, when President Donald Trump publicly offered to buy Greenland from Denmark. In response to this, the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said, "Greenland is not for sale. Greenland is not Danish. Greenland belongs to Greenland. I strongly hope this proposal is not meant seriously." The statement of the U.S. President also drew the ire of Greenland's Prime Minister, who said, "Greenland is not for sale and cannot be sold. But Greenland is open for trade and cooperation with other countries, including the United States." Greenland is an exciting place to visit today, and the influx of foreign visitors has continued to increase. The cold weather and all that it brings are certainly worth experiencing for daring tourists worldwide. To learn more about Eric the Red and why Denmark owns Greenland, check out our book, Eric the Red, a captivating guide to the Viking who founded the first Norse settlement in Greenland. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.
This was so impactful. I learned so many things from this video. How one country tried to buy, how the US tried to buy Greenland for so many years. Even recently in 2019, Trump made the offer. Oh my God, it's been such a long time coming, and one would think they would have given up by now. Greenland must be so blessed with like a lot of tourist attraction, because why are they so invested and interested in buying Greenland? This was really nice. So why is Greenland part of Denmark? You have it. There you have it. I hope you learned one or two from this video. If you did, please share with your friends so they can learn as well. Comment down below all your thoughts. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if I yet to do that. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.